Okay, so get ready for this one, because today we're diving into a research method that sounds like something straight out of a spy movie.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
The Bogus Pipeline. Have you heard of this?
I have heard of this.
Okay, so
Yeah.
for our listeners who haven't, break it down.
So the bogus pipeline, it's this fake lie detector that some social psychologists use
Right.
to try to get more honest answers out of their research participants.
It's like they're trying to trick people into telling the truth.
Kinda.
Right.
They basically hook people up to this machine
Okay.
with all the bells and whistles,
Well, wow.
blinking lights and complicated readouts and...
Polygraph.
Yeah, exactly. And convince them that it can detect even the tiniest little fib.
Like it's like a prop from a movie set.
Exactly.
Designed to make people spill the beans.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I'd be sweating bullets if I thought I was hooked up to something like that.
Yeah, me too.
Right.
And that's exactly the idea. So...
The thinking is that by creating this illusion of this lie detector that can catch you no matter what, people are more likely to admit to things they wouldn't otherwise.
like confess their deepest, darkest secrets.
Maybe not that deep,
Right.
but definitely things they might be inclined to hide.
Okay, so I see how this could be a powerful tool for research,
Yeah,
like getting more honest data.
exactly.
But ethically, this feels like a slippery slope to me.
You're hitting the nail on the head.
Right.
And that's what we're really going to unpack today.
Okay, so lay it on us. What kind of ethical quandaries does this bogus pipeline raise?
So we're looking at this paper from 1997 by a Guinness,
McGinnis.
like the beer,
Okay.
and Handelsman, and they really delve into these ethical concerns.
So what's their take on this whole bogus pipeline thing?
Well, their main argument is that just because other research involves deception doesn't automatically make this okay.
Okay.
You know, there's a difference between the idea of deception.
And how it's actually done.
So it's not a black and white issue.
Exactly.
There are shades of gray when it comes to deception in research.
Definitely.
Okay, help me understand this.
Sure.
What are some examples of deception in research that might be considered okay versus not okay?
Okay, so think about it this way.
Okay.
If you're in a study and you're told it's about memory,
Uh-huh.
but it's actually about how you react to stress,
Right.
that's deception.
Yeah.
But it's not on the same level as convincing someone they're hooked up to this machine that can read their every thought.
Like the bogus pipeline takes to a whole other level.
Right. It feels a lot more invasive and potentially manipulative.
Even if they tell you the truth afterwards.
You mean debriefing?
Yeah, debriefing.
Yeah.
Even with that, wouldn't that experience still stick with you?
That's one of the big concerns.
Right.
Even with debriefing, could going through a bogus pipeline study damage someone's trust in psychologists?
Or even researchers in general.
Exactly.
That's a scary thought.
It is.
And if people start to distrust research, wouldn't that have a ripple effect on scientific progress as a whole?
Absolutely. If people become wary of participating in studies
Right.
because they're afraid of being deceived,
Yeah.
it could really hinder our ability to understand human behavior.
Which affects all of us, right?
Exactly.
So it sounds like a Guinness and Handelsman aren't saying never use the bogus pipeline.
Right.
They're saying, hold on, we need to carefully examine the ethical implications here.
Exactly.
It's like they're calling for a deeper dive.
They are. They propose this whole research agenda to study the ethical dimensions of the bogus pipeline,
So they want to gather data to see if the potential benefits.
like getting more truthful data
Right.
outweigh the potential costs.
That makes sense. We need evidence, not just opinions, to make informed decisions.
Exactly.
So what kind of research are they suggesting?
They propose a pretty clever approach.
Okay.
Instead of actually putting people through a bogus pipeline experiment. They suggest having people just read descriptions of these studies
Okay.
and then gauge their reactions.
But you'd ask people, imagine you were in this study. How would you feel?
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
It minimizes potential harm while still getting at those crucial ethical considerations.
Right. And some of the questions they propose are really interesting.
Like what?
Do participants in bogus pipeline studies feel stressed or embarrassed? Do they feel like their trust has been violated?
Yeah.
Do they understand the value of the research even after being deceived?
That last one is really interesting. 'Cause
Yeah.
it makes me wonder, if someone understands the purpose and importance of the research,
Right.
even if it involves some level of deception, might they be more forgiving?
It's possible, but again,
We need data to know for sure.
we need data.
And that's what a Guinness and Handelsman are advocating for.
Yeah.
more research to shed light on these complex ethical questions.
Right. It's not about shutting down a research method entirely, but ensuring it's used responsibly and ethically.
Which brings us back to you, the listener.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, what do you think?
Does the potential for more honest data justify using a bogus pipeline? Where do you draw the line when it comes to deception in research?
Yeah. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it really is.
You know, reading about this bogus pipeline, I can't help but think about, like, those classic psychology experiments.
Right.
Like the Milgram obedience study.
Oh, yeah.
That used deception.
Where they made people think they were shocking other people.
Yeah.
Well,
it was groundbreaking in terms of what it revealed about human behavior.
Right. How easily people can obey authority figures.
Right.
Even when it goes against their own moral compass.
Exactly.
But the ethical implications are still debated today.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's this inherent tension.
Right.
Between wanting to uncover these truths about human nature and the responsibility to protect the well-being of research participants.
Absolutely.
It's a tricky balance.
Very tricky.
Right.
And it's not just about the individual participants either.
Oh, what do you mean?
There's also the question of how this kind of deception could impact the public's perception of psychology.
Oh, interesting.
And research as a whole.
Now that you mention it, I could see how someone who felt tricked by a bogus pipeline might be less likely to trust a therapist.
Right.
Or even participate in future research studies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If people start to believe that researchers are routinely manipulating them, it could really erode trust in the whole field.
Right. Like, what if people became hesitant to seek help from therapists?
Right.
Or participate in studies that could lead to medical breakthroughs?
Exactly. That's a potential consequence we have to consider.
It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
One ethically questionable study could have these far-reaching consequences, impacting not just the individuals involved, but the way the public perceives the whole field.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that Guinness and Handelsman are encouraging this critical discussion.
Yeah.
You know, they're not just accepting the status quo. They're pushing us to really think deeply about these issues and gather evidence to make more informed decisions.
It's a call to action, really,
It is.
for researchers and ethics boards and even the public to be more aware,
more discerning,
and to hold each other accountable.
Absolutely. We can't just sweep these ethical concerns under the rug.
So what can we do?
Well,
as individuals.
Yeah, as individuals.
To engage in this conversation.
I think, first of all, we need to educate ourselves.
Okay.
Learn about different research methods.
Right.
Understand the complexities of ethics and research.
Uh-huh.
And just be aware of the potential impact of deception.
Even when it's done with good intention.
Even with the best of intention,
right.
Things can go wrong.
It's about being informed consumers of research.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Oh, good point.
If you're participating in a study, ask about the procedures involved.
Yeah.
If you're reading about a study, think about the ethical implications.
Right.
Talk about it with your friends and family.
Have those conversations.
Yeah, have those conversations. The more we talk about these issues, the more we can collectively work towards solutions.
It's about moving beyond this simple right or wrong dichotomy.
Yeah.
And embracing the nuance.
The gray areas.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're right.
And acknowledging that even with the best intentions, research can have unintended consequences.
Right.
And being willing to have those tough conversations about where to draw the line.
So where does this leave us?
Oh.
In our deep dive into the bogus pipeline.
Yeah.
And the ethics of deception in research.
I think the big takeaway here is that the pursuit of knowledge should never come at the cost of ethical principles.
We have a responsibility to treat research participants with respect.
Absolutely.
To protect their well-being.
Yes.
And to be transparent about the methods we use.
Transparency is key.
It feels like we could talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
It's such a complex issue.
It really is.
You know, going back to the paper by Guinness and Handelsman, what really struck me was their call for more research into the ethical dimensions of the bogus pipeline.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just debate it, right?
No.
Philosophically,
we need data.
We need evidence to inform our decision.
Absolutely.
So their proposed research agenda is really interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a really clever way to get at those ethical concerns without actually harming anyone.
Right. By studying how people react to descriptions of these studies.
Exactly.
So what kind of specific information would researchers be looking for?
Well, they'd be looking at, the level of stress or discomfort participants might experience, whether they feel like their trust has been violated, and even how their perceptions of psychologists and researchers might change.
It's like trying to anticipate the potential consequences
Exactly.
before they actually happen,
Right.
and then using that information to guide ethical decision-making.
Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about being proactive
It is.
rather than reactive.
Right.
And ultimately, it's about protecting the integrity of research
Yeah.
as a whole.
If people lose faith in research,
Right.
it's going to be really hard to make progress.
Absolutely.
It's going to be hard to get people to participate.
Yeah. Who's going to volunteer for a study
Right.
if they think they're going to be tricked or manipulated?
Exactly.
So it's a much bigger issue than just one research method.
It is.
It's about maintaining that public trust.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the bogus pipeline
Yeah.
and the ethics of deception in research,
It's a tricky one,
it is
but an important one.
really important.
It is.
I think the key takeaway here
Yeah.
is that we all have a role to play
We do.
in ensuring that research is conducted ethically.
Keep asking questions.
Keep asking those tough questions.
Challenge assumptions.
Right.
And stay engaged in this conversation.
Because the pursuit of knowledge
Yeah.
should never come at the expense of our ethical principles.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.
See you.
Until then, stay curious.